Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I am Gebo the Shaman, and today we are talking about, we're reading from Odin Says Jesus Was a Coward, the Monotheist Subversion of Traditional Religious Thought. So, we'll be reading from that book, and of course, if you want to check out anything that I have to offer, you can check out my book. It's Tantric Secrets of Vedic Astrology, and my courses up here: Qigong courses, astrology readings, birth time rectification, rune readings, a whole bunch of stuff I have to offer up there, so go check that out as well. Go check out my website, gebotheshaman.com. And alright, let's get into it. So, this is called Odin Says Jesus Was a Coward, the Monotheist Subversion of Traditional Religious Thought. And so so we're on part 6 or 7. I don't even know now. It's like a lot. We've done so much, read so much. All right, so we are now on the chapter called Elohim versus Jehovah. So Elohim versus Jehovah. While Jehovah is the most well-known name of God in the Old Testament, he has others. Among them is the name Elohim. Interestingly, however, the name Elohim does not translate to God, but as the gods or the powers. The word Elohim is plural for El, which simply means power or God. Elohim is the exact same word used by the Proto-Hebraic Canaanite tribes to denote their entire polytheist pantheon. Their gods were simply referred to as Elohim. There's no confusion as to the meaning of the word. It absolutely refers to multiple deities, not just one. Since we have already determined that the Hebrew tribes were directly descended from the Canaanites, it is no great leap of deduction to logically assume. Sorry, guys. Quiet my phone. So it is no great leap of deduction to logically assume that the Hebrew polytheist pantheon before the Babylonian captivity was also known as Elohim. The pre-Babylonian polytheist religion of the Hebrew tribes must have been a direct evolutionary continuation of the Canaanite polytheist religion. The creation myth of the book of Genesis most likely contained pre-captivity Canaanite mythical elements that were already probably well known in Hebrew polytheism. The average Hebrew person was probably aware of the Elohim of the Hebrew creation myth. Most likely they had grown up hearing about the creation of the cosmos by the Elohim, or Council of Gods. It would probably have been political suicide for the Jewish priests to completely remove the Elohim from their new creation myth and replace it with Jehovah. Just as in the Christian conversion period in Europe, where existing polytheist traditions were incorporated into Christianity, such as Christmas and Easter, the returning Jewish priests had to prevent alienating the Jewish masses from their new religion. removal of the term Elohim from their creation myth would most likely have been seen as blasphemous. It probably was just easier for them to reinterpret the meaning of the word Elohim to fit their new monotheist interpretation rather than remove it from their ancient mythology or replace it with the word Jehovah. This idea of plural deities remains throughout the early books of the Old Testament, even in the monotheist version. In Genesis, the phrase "let us" is used repeatedly, where the supposed singular deity talks to himself before accomplishing varying acts of creation. Let us create man in our image. Let us go down and confuse their language. Man has become like one of us, etc. Ironically, it is this same plural word Elohim that is interchangeably used to denote both the almighty monotheist God and of the Hebrews, and also the false pagan gods that were to be avoided. Thou shalt have no other gods, Elohim, before me. Both Christians and Jews have very elaborate and complicated justifications for the monotheist interpretation of the use of the word Elohim in the Bible. But the simple fact is that the writers of the Old Testament had the ability to clearly distinguish between the singular God and the plural gods in their language, just like the European conversion to Christianity. Aspects of the original polytheist tradition simply refuse to disappear. Some Jewish scholars will tell you that God hid behind the mask of multiple gods until he revealed his true self to Moses in the burning bush and revealed his true name of Jehovah. Since we have already deduced that the myth of Moses was an invention of the Jewish priests during the Babylonian captivity to reinforce the new monotheist religion, a more plausible explanation is that the burning bush was merely a dramatic symbol of the new monotheist God burning away the older polytheist religion. This can easily become a very lengthy and complicated investigation. However, for me, the meaning of the word Elohim in Hebrew, combined with the archaic meaning of Elohim in the Canaanite language, is the undeniable smoking gun that proves that Jewish monotheism has its roots in Canaanite polytheism. Jehovah, the God of ego. Let us now examine the essence of the name Jehovah. I am that I am. According to the Old Testament, Jehovah reveals himself to his prophet Moses as a burning bush, who is called I am that I am, or Yahweh, i.e. Jehovah. Let us review just a bit of what Jehovah says to Moses in the book of Exodus, chapter 20. Quote, I and God spoke all these words, saying, I am Jehovah, thy God, who brought thee out of the land of Egypt, and out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee a graven image, nor any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, nor that is in the water under the earth. 5. Thou shalt not bow down thyself unto them, nor serve them. For I, Jehovah, thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, upon the third and upon the fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing loving kindness unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Notice how that's end of quote. Notice how Jehovah keeps repeating all the different ways we are not supposed to worship other gods. This obsessive repetition reveals an insecurity, ill-fitting in Almighty being, but to the point at hand. What is interesting to me is the meaning of the name Jehovah, I am that I am. Why did he choose that particular name for himself? As the almighty source of all existence, there is an infinite number of names that he could choose from. But he chose to call himself I am. Why not I am all things and all things are I? Or I am thou? Or I am thou and thou art I? Or I am the essence of all beings? Instead, he chooses I am that I am. Why does he choose a name that separates himself from all of his creation? Why not choose a name that inspires his creation to feel close to him? Why not reinforce a sense of kinship? Why does the Almighty Jehovah, who supposedly dwells in all places and times, take such personal offense at being seen in the heavens, in the earth, or under the sea? Wouldn't he, if he indeed is the source of all things, automatically exist in all graven images, and in all of these different locations? Wouldn't all of these different methods of worship, by definition, bring him glory? Why does Jehovah get so jealous? He even admits it. The reasonable conclusion is that he must not exist in any of those images and places he commands us not to worship. He must be the opposite of what he claims to be. He must not be infinite. He must be extremely limited, so limited, in fact, that the only place he can be found is within himself, and in nothing and no one else. Jehovah must be the epitome of limitation. And what about Jehovah's attitude when he meets Moses for the first time? Why does Jehovah choose to start his relationship with Moses in such an adversarial manner? Here the creator of the universe seeks out humans and supposedly reveals himself to the world in his full glory, and shares his true name with those humans made in his holy image, and his opening line to them is, I exist unto myself with no connection to anything or anyone else outside of me. Worship me and only me. If you don't worship me, worship me and only me. And if you don't worship me and only me, then you obviously hate me, and I will curse you and your children for 4 generations. But if you obey me and worship me, I'll bless you. How does this attitude convey anything other than the classic definition of psychopathic narcissism? If these words were spoken by any human, he or she would immediately be categorized as a very dangerous, destructive, mentally ill person. In fact, these These are the same kinds of words spoken by mentally deranged psychopaths, tyrants, and serial killers. Why would we tolerate such an attitude from a deity? In my opinion, Jehovah is nothing more than the most narcissistic aspect of the human ego. Worship of Jehovah is worship of one's own narcissism, nothing more. And it makes perfect sense for the returning defeated Jewish elite to channel such a narcissistic, impotent deity of light. Impotent deity in the light of events leading up to their captivity. The inventors of this new religion were the descendants of the politicians and priests who were recently shamed and embarrassed in front of their own subjects by having their country forcibly taken from them by powerful foreign invaders. After their captivity, they were returning home to the same subjects who watched them, or presumably their parents, 70 years earlier, being taken away in chains. I would be interested to know if the lengthy genealogies of the Old Testament corresponded with the family names of those returning to Judea, claiming to be their new leaders. If, presumably, after 70 years, the original elite who were taken into captivity were either dead or very old, it only makes sense that their descendants would return and seek to legitimize their family prestige, their family pedigree to establish their right of succession. These returning elite must have been terrified of losing their parents' previous claim to power, and so they established the classic psychological defense mechanism of projection. They projected their sense of shame and impotence upon their intended subjects, fearing that their subjects will blame them for losing the country to the Babylonians. The returning Jewish elite, instead of facing their own shame and embarrassment, blamed their own subjects for the fact that the ruling elite, their parents, were unable to protect their subjects from foreign invasion, as they were expected to do. The definition of projection in the psychological sense is projection is the misattribution of a person's undesired thoughts, feelings, or impulses onto another person who does not have those thoughts, feelings, or impulses. Projection is used especially when thoughts are considered unacceptable for the person to let's see here. Unacceptable for the person to express, or they feel completely ill at ease with having them. Projection is often the result of a lack of insight and knowledge and acknowledgement of one's own motivations and feelings. And that's from psychcentral.com. Since Jehovah is symbolic of the human ego, the worship of Jehovah is useful to those who feel disempowered, who carry a deep sense of shame and self-hatred, which characteristic of an already weakened ego. Monotheist Jehovah is the perfect deity for those unwilling to address their egomania, born of out of impotence. Monotheism is the perfect religion, is also the perfect religion for those who wish to disempower those with a strong sense of identity, who might pose a threat to their desired power over the masses. The perfect way to unite all people is through a nationalist religion that disempowers the individual and elevates the priests and the politicians. Such is the legacy of Jehovah. He started out as the invention of a defeated ruling elite of a relatively small and little-known country in the middle of the desert that was facing cultural extinction and assimilation by its neighbors. A feeble ruling elite trying desperately to assert their uniqueness in a politically and culturally unstable environment. By all accounts, this tiny, unnatural, illogical, and awkward monotheist religion should have either died or have faded into the background, or have been overlooked by its more powerful and successful neighbors. But instead, slowly, over time, this new belief of monotheism has grown to be the preferred method of religious, cultural, and political control of a worldwide empire that increasingly dominates the globe, now 2,600 years later. Despite the good intention of the small minority of well-meaning adherents to the Big Three, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, the most heinous and destructive acts committed in the last 500 to 1,000 years, colonialism, genocide, terrorism, slavery, ecological destruction, military aggression, etc., were all committed either directly or indirectly under the banner of monotheism. Monotheism and the empire mindset. Monotheism can only work under certain conditions, but in those conditions it thrives extremely well because it, let me see here. Monotheism can only work under certain conditions, but in those conditions it thrives extremely well because it helps to justify illogical and unnaturally imposed philosophies that are not naturally unsustainable. Conversely, animism and polytheism work well where people live in traditional hunter-gatherer conditions, or must live in direct harmony with their environmental resources. Monotheism works extremely well when the natural and logical methods of surviving the natural world have been subverted in order to facilitate the acquisition of inordinate amounts of natural resources in relation to the size of a population in question. When any society seeks to acquire more natural resources than they can naturally replenish, it is necessary to impose an illogical mindset that uses warped reasoning to justify the untenable position which has been adopted by that society to take more resources than they can replace. In such a context, a society must find ways to obtain more resources than they can find in their immediate surroundings. This scenario creates what I am referring to as the imperial mindset. It may sound like I'm referring to modern Western society. Indeed, we are living in a culture that utilizes an imperial mindset. The entire globe is currently living under an imperial mindset. We have been doing so increasingly and uninterruptedly since the Roman conquest period. But this same imperial mindset actually has its roots in the ancient past. The Romans did not invent the imperial mindset, but they perfected it. Even though the Roman Empire itself has fallen, the infrastructure of that empire, both mentally and externally, has remained and been expanded upon since the fall of Rome. I cannot definitively pinpoint the exact time and location of the imperial mindset first made its appearance on the world stage. Most likely it has erupted and faded away numerous times before it really took hold and began to flourish. We can see archaeological evidence of this mindset all around the world, from pre-Columbian Americans to ancient Egypt, Asia, and most certainly Mesopotamia, where it had its modern genesis. Cataloging all of the instances of empires throughout history would require a much longer book. I am not an expert in those details, and this is not the focus of this book. The reader is encouraged to research any ancient empire they wish in order to see how this mindset plays itself out. Before imperialism, our natural survival strategy that we humans effectively used throughout 98,000 of the past 100,000 years is that of interdependence within the natural world. The imperial mindset completely disrupted that evolutionary strategy and radically changed the way humans now interact with our environment. Before empires, human beings, in order to survive, had no choice but to live in direct harmony with their immediate environments. When someone today uses this kind of language, living in harmony with nature, it sounds very New Agey and esoteric. But for our ancient ancestors, living in harmony with nature was simply the only method of survival available to them. It was also a very effective, practical, and logical strategy. If any group of people was not able to sustain themselves within their immediate environment, they either had to die or migrate somewhere else. The genesis of an empire. In a nutshell, this is how an empire is born. For explanation purposes, let's create a fictional pre-imperial society that adopts the imperial mindset. How exactly does this happen? And how does their mindset transform as a result? Let's say that these people in our fictional example are hunter-gatherers who become subsistence farmers. In order for them to survive, they need to access water, fertile land for growing food and sustaining their livestock. They most likely need access to wild game for hunting purposes. If they experience extreme weather events such as droughts, floods, or extreme weather swings of temperature, these events have a very profound effect on their ability to survive. So, their need to live in a dynamic balance with their natural environment is a very practical matter of survival. To accommodate their practical needs, They practice a form of religion that reflects their real-life experience and has served their ancestors for tens of thousands of years. They practice an animist religion, which recognizes the diversity of powers and influences that surround them. Their religion is an attempt on their part to understand and predict how to best live in accordance with the dynamic changes in nature. They most likely are polytheists, who seek to achieve a state of harmony with all the different aspects of nature. They see natural forces like sun, moon, thunder, lightning, day, night, the shifting of the seasons, etc., as conscious entities with whom they can interact. Indeed, they feel it necessary to establish a relationship with these forces in order to survive. Their way of life, their means of survival, are all integrated and all serve the same function. But all of this is about to change, because these people are going to discover ways that seemingly take them out of this natural cycle. This will change how they view themselves and their relationship to their environment. This change in perception is monumental and is a shift that divorces them from at least 100,000 years of human experience and evolution. This fictional community of people discovers a method of acquiring a larger than necessary amount of natural resources. For this example, let's say they discover how to grow large amounts of grain. Much more grain than they have ever been able to grow in the past. This is initially very good for them, because the community now has a larger reserve of grain to feed themselves through winter. But in order to safely store the grain, they construct grain silos, wherein they store it. Other surrounding communities hear of their neighbors' ample grain supplies, so they naturally become envious, and they begin to steal grain for themselves. So, in order to protect the grain from thieves, the community must recruit people to guard and protect the grain from theft. But now there are fewer farmers to work the fields, because instead of farming, more and more of them are guarding the surplus grain. Simultaneously, as a result of their newfound prosperity, the community grows larger, because there is more food available to sustain their growing population. But the community's need for more farmers, soldiers, and land to sustain their growth is increasing exponentially. The community begins to increase its armed forces and uses its army to conquer their surrounding neighbors. They enslave their neighbors and use their neighbors' lands for supplying their growing need for resources. Meanwhile, the conquered neighbor population is taken into slavery to work their own fields for the benefit of the conquerors. Within a relatively short amount of time, the once small subsistence farming community has now grown into a city-state, wherein most of its elite citizens live densely packed live densely packed within city walls for their protection against their resentful and fearful neighbors. Inside their city walls, living in unnaturally close proximity to one another and their domesticated animals, creates health problems from exposure to human and animal waste. Many people may not be aware that the diseases brought to the New World by Europeans that ravaged the Native American population came into existence because of these exact conditions I am describing here. The creation of the imperial mindset is actually brought these horrible diseases into existence. Smallpox, tuberculosis, influenza, and other infectious diseases came into existence as the result of human domestication, of humans domesticating wild animals, and then living in unnaturally close proximity to them. The influenza virus that mutates into a new strain every year kills millions every year and kills millions is the direct result of the mutation of a virus that is normally not communicable to humans. This virus starts out as a bird virus residing in a domesticated fowl that is transmitted to domesticated pigs. Pig DNA is similar to human DNA. The once harmless bird virus mutates inside of pigs, and then it becomes contagious to humans. Every year, a new strain of fowl virus is transmitted to pigs, wherein the virus mutates into a strain that is communicable to humans. Human farmers come into contact with the pigs and then spread the new version of the flu to other humans that spread it around the globe. This process happens anew every year. That is why the new flu vaccines are manufactured every year. If humans never started domesticating fowl and pigs and didn't keep them caged near each other, these diseases would never have arisen at all. As the reader may already know, most Native Americans died from these civilized diseases before ever seeing a European. These diseases spread across North America because These diseases spread across North America before the European colonization of the New World. Some estimates conclude that 95% of the Native American population died from European diseases during the conquest of the Americas. Interestingly enough, when these diseases began killing native populations, Native Americans believed that it was a result of evil spirits attacking them. As it happens, these diseases are a direct result of the imperial mindset created thousands of years earlier, during the inception of the imperial mindset in Mesopotamia, and later in Europe. The hunter-gatherers of the New World were very literally killed by the imperial mindset. This mindset invaded North America in the form of these diseases before Europeans ever set foot on the New World. So in a very real sense, those Native Americans were correct. The demons of imperialism killed them in advance of the European conquest of the Americas. But once again, I digress. Back to our fictional example. As a result of previous developments, the city-state dwellers are no longer directly connected to the natural resources that sustain them. All survival needs, such as food, clothing, timber, skins, etc., are brought to them from outside the city, oftentimes from neighboring lands. The ruling elite and upper-class citizens are now completely disconnected from their immediate environments and no longer feel themselves dependent on their immediate surroundings. They no longer feel a personal need to worship the traditional nature deities associated with farming. They no longer feel a personal connection to their ancestral animist religion that understood the concept of living responsibly within a limited ecosystem. The people outside of the city who are involved in the day-to-day tasks of harvesting food and resources from the natural environment are the conquered slaves, and working classes, who, although disenfranchised, are now part of this imperial system. The growing and harvesting they do now is not out of personal need for survival, but by mandate of the ruling elite from within the city walls, upon whom they are dependent for their survival. So as victims of circumstance, the laborers too are divorced from the traditional understanding that one only takes what one needs from their immediate survival. Instead of trusting the natural environment to provide for them, as was their ancestors' understanding, the common folk began to see the natural environment as something to exploit. They began to see the natural environment as something to conquer. The growing population of citizens, slaves, and workers continues to increase, necessitating the acquisition of more resources. You can predict how the imperial mindset begins to balloon out of proportion and creates a self-perpetuating cycle. What used to be a society that identified with nature, who provided for them, they now identify as belonging to a nation or city-state that provides for them. They now feel the need to worship their country, their military, their government, and that provides their needs through conquest and exploitation. Alright guys, so I'm gonna go ahead and leave it there. Let me see how far we have to go. Let's see, yeah, so I'm gonna leave it there. We'll start off with the sub-chapter, A Difficult Remedy. Alright guys, well, yeah, we're about 45 minutes in, so thought I'd leave it there. And yeah, so that was a good reading. If you're just joining us for this one, I would recommend going from the beginning, because we have a lot of, this is like the 6th or 7th episode in this series, so highly recommend going from the first episode and going forward from there. So anyway guys, if you are interested in anything that I have to offer, any books, I have my Tantric Secrets of Vedic Astrology book right here. You can check that out on Amazon. And aside from that, we have Qigong courses, rune readings, astrology courses, astrology readings, career coaching, life coaching, trauma healing course, distance energy healing, all that good stuff. So highly encourage you guys to check that out. And yeah, so as I said, like before, I am a Vedic astrologer. I do all kinds of stuff. So anyway, guys, appreciate you guys, and we will talk to you next time. Peace.